And I want to continue your last line of questioning. Associate myself with what you were saying and what you're implying here. Because this is not simply going to be solved by putting more resources and money. Remember the IRS debates that we had. We know the cuts that existed over administrations that were both red and blue. As I always say, no party is privileged virtue that I know of. But, Mr. Camp, your testimony is quite, I went over it again. Very interesting when you talked about veterans. I'm almost numb when I talk about veterans. And I think in the area which you covered, eliminating reconsideration, I'm even more concerned about a vet going to get some help from Social Security, SSI, disability. And I know from listening to many people that simply, it's nothing simple, but just having an increase in resources, more money to do the solution is not enough. Because if we don't have the right policies, then we're defeating ourselves by simply duplicating if we think that just more folks are going to solve the problem. I want to make that very, very, very clear. And, you could simply, slide it away by saying, just throwing money at the problem. You've heard that millions of times. But there is a problem. Money is part of the solution, but policies probably are a greater part of the solution. Would you agree?
Yes.
How do you get that point across? Besides, your illustrations are the best, or what?
The actual experiences of real claimants have to drive this policy. See it from the perspective of a veteran that went through the VA's disability process already. Lots of expense, lots of time, lots of filling out forms, going to see their doctor. They see all of their evidence. Now that same person with that same evidence and those same conditions goes to another federal government agency and has to repeat the entire process and has that second agency say, we will not pay attention to the VA's findings. See it from that veteran's perspective.
Right.
That drives the policy decision then, which is that all adjudicators at Social Security should pay careful attention and discuss how they've considered the findings of the VA.
I think that's a good model example for a lot of federal agencies. These are replicated in most of the agencies that we were mentioned this morning. But I think it's something we need to dig into. You have to have modern technology. You got to update your data, and it's pretty elemental. I don't think we're discovering something here. It's there, and we need to take a look at it. And I want to ask Linda, Ms. Davis, there was underfunding for years. I mean, you look at the numbers and you see the cuts that were made. And that seriously eroded the service that you can provide to people. I understand that. We all do. I think, though, that the suggestions of making more cuts would simply make it worse. So what would happen to Social Security's customers? Customer service and disability application backlogs, if your budget was slashed by 30%?
So first of all, thank you very much for the question. I do have to tell you, I'm not an expert on budget issues, but I've been around the program for a long time.
Neither is the Congress.
Yeah, true.
Welcome aboard.
But a 30% cut would be completely devastating to SSA. So people who apply for disability, they would wait at least 2 months longer than what they're currently waiting. It would likely impact the office hours for our field offices, even with level funding. Level funding from last year, from FY '23, it's going to be detrimental to SSA. It's not sufficient for us to continue to build our DDS workforce or even maintain it for that matter. With only level funding, we would expect average wait time for an initial disability claim to go up, like I said, by 2 months, and actually double the average wait time from what they had experienced in 2019 pre-pandemic.
I think what we're looking for,
Gentlemen, time-wise right there. I love listening to you talk, but we over by about a minute.
I know what the cuts mean, but I want you to know how we feel, how I feel. And that is that even if we even if we can avoid those cuts, we need a lot of changes in the policy of delivering service.
Okay.
And that's the point I think we can sit down and compromise and get to some final solution, if you'd call it. And I think that's important for us. I really do. And thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Now yield to the gentleman from the great state of Ohio, Mr. Carey.
I want to thank my friend Chairman Ferguson and Ranking Member Pascrell for once again hosting a hearing to discuss the issues that our constituents are facing as it relates to the Social Security Administration. As somebody who first read Future Shock when I was probably 13 years old, and then the third wave, I find it very troubling that we're still talking about phone calls and faxes, and the fact that we don't have government agencies that are able to communicate with one another. So I really wish that, and we just can't do it in this body, but I really wish we could have our constituent aides sitting up here with us that are dealing with you every single day, because the calls that we get are just remarkable. So, and again, faxes to me are basically like trying to find an 8-track tape player. So I just kind of think it's a little outdated. Listen, I know my office is not alone in hearing from our constituents over and over again about how hard it is to actually get a hold of Social Security Administration. I know my dear friends have talked about the cuts to staffing. Wait times for the 1-800 number continue to increase and have reached upwards of many times 30 minutes. Some people get kicked off. I've heard that several times. They've called and they call and they call and they call. The thing that reminds me of, when you go for a home loan application and you call any one of the national, you can get a call right back right away, or the wait time is pretty easy, and then you get an email, which seems pretty standard nowadays, right? It's concerning to me that SSA has done little to act on the backlog and at times made the problem worse. And I'm glad we're working today to get to the root cause of these issues and talk through solutions that SSA can implement to process claims in a timely manner and provide Americans more accurate decisions. I really, Mr. Camp, that story about the person waiting, 825 days, and then died of the disease or the affliction that could have been resolved possibly if they would have just had gotten what they needed 500 days before. And I think it's a terrible story. So my question, I'm running out of time here. When SSA evaluates the work history of a disability insurance applicant, the SSA reviews whether the claimant can still have any substantial gainful work performed over the last 15 years, known as a look-back period. SSA recently published a proposed rule to reduce the look-back period from 15 years to 5 years, right? Dr. Wojcicki, what are the effects of reducing this level of scrutiny as it applied to a claimant's work history?
Thank you for your question. Very simply, in the proposed regulation, the immediate result is an additional $27 billion in disability benefits. That is not related at all to an assessment of the person's ability to work, because basically you've chopped off 10 years of a work history. And so there really is no justification provided in the proposed regulation. The data that and studies that have been cited in the proposed regulation are misleading and incomplete. They misrepresent results, and then furthermore, the budget implications are actually severely underestimated because it does not mention the additional cost to Medicare, Medicaid, and other federal and state welfare program spending. And finally, they justify it by saying that work conditions have changed over time, which they certainly have, and that's the whole point of getting new data, but yet they don't cite the data. So it's a very perplexing and disappointing proposal, really unjustified. I believe it should be removed.
So when you were at Social Security Administration, were you considering changes to the look period before?
Yes, in the context of a total reform of the program, and we did consider reducing it from 15 years to 10, which was justified by the data and by the evidence. But that's only in context of a much larger reform that modernized and automated the program. And when in the context of the larger change, it was a very small expense as opposed to $27 billion.
I want to thank you all, and again, I want to appreciate the chairman, the ranking member, for having this important hearing, and just know that we all do appreciate you. I know you probably spent many hours preparing for this hearing, and appreciate all your comments. Thank you very much, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. Next, we go to the gentlelady from California, Ms. Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to our ranking member. Last week, this subcommittee met to discuss